I'm Alexa. It's Thanksgiving, and I'm sitting at a table in a community meal organized by a Maritime Workers Association, serving turkey to retired dock workers, young families, and Coast Guard cadets. It's a far cry from the Thanksgiving I grew up with, but I've never felt more at peace. A few weeks ago, my life was turned upside down. It all started when I was standing in the grocery store, looking at a freezer full of turkeys. My phone rang, and it was my sister, Lily. "You're paying my rent this month, $2,250, she said as soon as I answered. "Mom says you make more, so shut up and help." Before I could respond, she told me I was banned from Thanksgiving if the money wasn't wired by 5 o'clock. Then my mother texted, saying the family would tell everyone I'd let Lily become homeless. Another message came in right after that, saying Lily had already promised her landlord I'd pay. She warned me not to make her look stupid. I stared at those messages, and something inside me just snapped. They hadn't even asked if I could help. They'd just assigned me a debt, announced my punishment, and prepared a story where I was the bad guy. I typed good luck and finished buying my groceries. But I had no idea what was really going on. You see, I'm an investigator for aviation insurance fraud. I'm trained to spot when something doesn't add up. And the amount Lily was asking for just didn't feel right. Her normal rent was $1,800, and I knew that because she'd sent me a photo of her lease 7 months ago when she was complaining about how overpriced her apartment was. The extra $450 could have been a late fee, but it still seemed off. I called her back, and she ignored the first call. When she answered the second one, she sighed irritably. I asked why the amount was higher, and she said utilities had gone up. I reminded her that water and heat were included. Then she changed her story and said the landlord had added an emergency administrative charge. When I asked what the emergency was, she accused me of interrogating her. "Either send it or don't," she snapped. "I don't have time for your detective routine." That's when I knew she was hiding something. And then my mother called. Her voice was low and urgent, the way she always sounds when she wants to make a command seem like love. She said Lily had had a tough year and needed compassion, not questions. I asked if she'd seen the rent notice, and she said no. I asked if she knew why the amount was exactly $2,250, and she paused. Then she said numbers weren't the point. Family was. "You have savings," she said. "You don't have kids, and your company pays you well. Lily has more responsibilities," she added. That sentence was so familiar. In our family, my careful planning and hard work were always seen as excessive, while Lily's emergencies became everyone's problem. I'd built up an emergency fund by skipping vacations, driving an old car, and taking night courses. But somehow, those choices made it seem like I should just finance her lifestyle. I told my mother I wouldn't send any money without seeing the landlord's written notice. Her voice got cold. "Thanksgiving dinner is at my house," she said. "Unless you fix this, you're not welcome. And I'll tell everyone why." I asked what she'd say, and she replied that one daughter succeeded because her family supported her, and then she abandoned her sister. It was so unfair. My parents had never paid for my college, rent, or textbooks. When I was 19 and my car broke down, my father said hardship built character. But when Lily dropped out of a private fashion design program, they paid her cancellation fee, credit card bill, and 3 months of rent because she was overwhelmed. When I got home, I opened my laptop and found the old lease photo. The apartment was owned by Mrs. Thompson, a retired airline executive. The lease prohibited unauthorized guests, business activities, and subletting. Lily had told me her boyfriend, Jake, had been staying over more often since he lost his place. And she'd started storing event equipment and catering supplies in the shared storage area. I'd warned her that both of those things could violate the lease, but she'd just brushed me off. Then, at 6:17 that evening, I got an email from Mrs. Thompson. The subject line was "Payment confirmation required." She thanked me for agreeing to pay Lily's outstanding balance and asked me to confirm the transfer would be made before the deadline. Attached was a document called Third-Party Payment Assurance. My name was at the bottom, along with my work email, job title, and a statement saying I'd personally guaranteed the balance. I'd never seen this document before. The phone number on it wasn't mine. Lily hadn't just told the landlord I might help. She'd forged a written promise in my name. I downloaded the attachment, saved the email header, and took screenshots of all the messages. Then I called my old colleague, Sarah, who now works with digital evidence at a law firm. "Did Lily really sign your name?" Sarah asked. I zoomed in on the signature. It looked like mine because it was from an old birthday card I'd sent my parents 3 years ago. I recognized the way my pen had slipped at the end. Sarah told me not to threaten anyone. She said to keep the files and respond with the facts. I hadn't agreed to pay, I hadn't authorized the use of my identity, and I hadn't signed the document. "You're not causing this," she said. "You're stopping a lie before it causes more damage." That night, I stopped worrying about whether the truth would hurt my family. Instead, I started thinking about how much their lies could hurt me if I kept quiet. Before I replied to Mrs. Thompson, I needed to know how Lily had gotten my private information. The assurance included an internal work email I hardly ever used outside the office and the last 4 digits of an old savings account. My mother had the email, and my parents had the savings account records in a file cabinet at their house. Lily couldn't have done this alone. At 7:03, my mother texted, "I hope you're proud of yourself. Lily has been crying for hours." I asked her one question: "Did you give her my work email or banking information?" She sent those 3 little dots, then they disappeared, and then they came back. She said she didn't remember. When I asked if she'd seen the document promising the landlord I'd pay, she stopped responding. Her silence took me back to when I was 14. I'd spent the whole summer cleaning vacation rentals near the mountains and saved enough money to buy a used tablet for school. 3 days before school started, Lily announced she needed a high-end camera for her photography hobby. My parents couldn't afford it, so my mother asked to borrow my tablet money. I refused. That night, the envelope with my money disappeared from my drawer. My mother later admitted she'd taken it, but she said it wasn't stealing because parents could redistribute resources between their kids. Lily used the camera a couple of times, and then it just sat in a corner. I got my money back in small amounts over the next year and a half, usually with a lecture about how I'd made everyone uncomfortable. That incident changed me. I stopped keeping money at home. I started saving receipts, copying documents, and reading every line before I signed anything. My family thought I was being too rigid, but those habits led me to my job in fraud investigation. Lily, on the other hand, was the opposite. She was charming and impulsive, and she was really good at getting people to support her latest ideas. When she was 20, she started a jewelry business. Our parents paid for the inventory. At 22, she launched a mobile makeup service, and our father bought her the van. At 26, she became an event planner and convinced relatives to invest in branding, vendor deposits, and a website. Every time a project failed, she called it a pivot, and every pivot needed someone else's money. I'd already paid her phone bill when she lost a contract, covered a car repair, and lent her $4,000 to pay off a tax debt that she'd actually used to go on a weekend trip with Jake. She'd only repaid $600 and then accused me of embarrassing her whenever I mentioned the rest. My father called after 8 o'clock. He asked if I could send half the rent to calm everyone down. I asked if he knew about the payment assurance. After a long pause, he said my mother had mentioned some paperwork, but it was just a formality. I asked if they'd given Lily my information, and he said he had no idea. Then he said, "Your sister wasn't trying to steal from you. She was just buying time." Time until what? Jake had been living in the apartment for almost a year. He'd been using the garage to repair and resell classic cars. The neighbors had complained about the noise, the fuel smell, and the customers blocking the alley. The landlord had issued 2 violation notices, but Lily had ignored them. After Jake damaged a shared wall during an argument, Mrs. Thompson terminated the tenancy. The $2,250 wasn't just rent. It covered unpaid rent, damage, and legal fees. If the money was paid by 5 o'clock, Mrs. Thompson had offered to delay the eviction for 10 days so Lily could move out on her own. But the deadline had already passed. I asked my father why Lily had called it rent. "She thought you'd say no if you knew everything," he said. "She'd lied because she was afraid the truth would stop me from helping. In our family, my consent was always seen as an obstacle." I asked my father if he understood that someone had forged my signature. He sighed and told me not to use legal terms against my own sister. He said no money had actually been taken from my account, as if a failed attempt at deception was okay. That was our family's way of thinking. If I stopped them, it didn't count. If I didn't, it was considered generous. Before he hung up, he warned me not to contact the landlord because the situation was delicate. But at 8:41, I replied to Mrs. Thompson. I told her I hadn't prepared, signed, or authorized the assurance. I'd never agreed to guarantee Lily's debts, and I wouldn't send any money. I asked her to keep the document and remove my name from the tenancy. 12 minutes later, Mrs. Thompson replied. She was very concerned because my mother had delivered the assurance in person that morning. She said my mother had arrived after 9 o'clock, claimed I was out of town on business, and assured her I'd authorized the agreement. She'd even shown a family photo to prove she was my mother. Mrs. Thompson had accepted the document for now but wanted direct confirmation before delaying the eviction. I called my mother. "Have you finally decided to do the right thing?" she asked. I asked if she'd delivered the document with my signature. She didn't deny it. She said the signature was just a placeholder and they'd tell me after I transferred the money. I asked where she'd gotten it, and she admitted taking a photo of the old birthday card. She insisted they weren't opening credit in my name or taking money. They just wanted to give the landlord confidence that the payment would come. I told her I'd already told Mrs. Thompson the promise was unauthorized. The line went silent. Then she screamed my name. She accused me of making Lily homeless on purpose. I reminded her that the eviction process had started before I even knew about the debt. She said I could still stop it if I paid. I refused. That's when she officially banned me from Thanksgiving and said my presence would upset Lily. 5 minutes later, a Facebook post appeared. It had a family photo from my graduation. Above it, my mother wrote, "Some children forget where they came from. Success means nothing when you abandon the people who supported you." She didn't mention the forged signature or the eviction. She didn't need to. The post made people assume things, and it protected her from having to answer direct questions. The comments started piling up. An aunt wrote that money couldn't replace family. A cousin said educated people could be arrogant. Lily added that she'd just asked for temporary help after a housing emergency and had been treated like a criminal. Jake wrote that some people liked watching others suffer from their comfortable offices. I almost posted the whole truth, but then I stopped. Public arguments are won by the person who leaves out the most details. I took screenshots of the post, the comments, the edits, and the timestamps. Then I wrote a reply. I didn't agree to pay anyone's rent, and I didn't authorize anyone to sign my name. Good luck. I didn't mention the landlord or the eviction. I just corrected the lies about me. Some of the comments disappeared right away. My aunt messaged me privately, asking what I meant by signing my name. My mother called over and over again. Lily sent 11 texts demanding I remove my comment. Jake accused me of threatening them with corporate nonsense. I muted all of them. Then Mrs. Thompson called. After getting my email, she compared the assurance with earlier messages. The document said I'd inspected the property and agreed to be responsible for any remaining balance after move out. Lily had also attached an insurance declaration page with my name on it to prove I was financially reliable. Mrs. Thompson sent it to me. It was from an old renter's insurance policy I'd canceled 4 years ago. My address and policy number had been changed, but the old insurer's logo was still there. Someone had edited an expired policy to make it look current. Since I work in insurance fraud, this document could ruin my career if people believed I'd created it. Up until then, part of me still thought this was just a desperate attempt to save the family. But this altered policy showed that they were willing to risk my livelihood to avoid the consequences of Lily's actions. Mrs. Thompson explained that the tenancy had already been terminated, and an enforcement officer was coming the next morning. The $2,250 would only have delayed the move out because the guarantee was invalid and the deadline had passed. She wouldn't postpone the eviction. She also planned to make Jake leave right away. He wasn't a tenant, and he'd already received a no-trespass notice after threatening a neighbor. At 10:26, my father texted in all caps, "What did you say to her?" "She's evicting him today. Answer your phone now." I replied, "I told her the truth. Ask Mom what she delivered this morning." For the first time that night, my father didn't have anything to say. By morning, Lily's crisis had become family news. My mother took down the Facebook post, but the screenshots had already spread. The relatives who had criticized me started asking careful questions. I didn't answer any of them. At 7:40, Mrs. Thompson sent an update. Jake had refused to leave, so the police had enforced the trespass notice. He left with a backpack and 2 storage bins. During the confrontation, he said Lily had told him her rich sister owned part of the building and could overrule the landlord. That was another lie about me. The enforcement officer arrived at 9 o'clock. Lily had known about this for more than 2 weeks. Instead of packing, she'd spent that time trying to create proof that payment and protection were coming. A moving crew took her belongings to the curb and a storage trailer. My mother sent me a photo of Lily sitting on a suitcase, crying. "I hope this was worth it," she wrote. Behind Lily were unopened decor boxes, catering equipment, and cases of fine wine. She'd said she couldn't pay rent because her clients had delayed payment, but there was thousands of dollars worth of inventory on the curb. Around noon, Sarah called. The metadata showed that the altered insurance declaration and the payment assurance had been exported from the same design account. The account name had Lily's business brand in it. The insurance file had been created 6 weeks ago. This wasn't a last-minute panic. It had been planned. Sarah also noticed invoice numbers on some of the boxes in my mother's photo. One was from a hotel chain where Lily had coordinated a corporate event 2 months ago. If the equipment belonged to the clients, it explained why she'd been so desperate to delay the eviction. Later, Mrs. Thompson said 2 hotel employees had come after recognizing their property. They showed purchase records for lighting fixtures, table linens, and a portable bar. Lily insisted the items had been given to her. The employees said she'd taken them for temporary storage and then stopped answering their calls. The rent demand was no longer the real issue. Lily had used the apartment as an unauthorized storage facility, let Jake run a business, stored client property, altered an insurance document, and forged my guarantee to buy time. She hadn't asked me for $2,250 to save her home. She'd asked me to cover up all her other problems. My father admitted that my parents knew she was storing business equipment, but they thought it was hers. They'd even helped her move the boxes. My mother had rented a moving van 2 weeks ago to help her organize the inventory. I asked why they hadn't used the van to move her out before the eviction. Lily had convinced them I'd pay and make the whole thing go away. My money wasn't their last resort. It was their plan. Lily finally called from a motel. She accused me of reporting her to the landlord, the police, and the clients. I told her I'd only contacted Mrs. Thompson to deny the false guarantee. Everything else had come from the notices and the property at the apartment. She said it didn't matter because I knew what would happen. I asked if she understood how the altered insurance document could hurt my career. She said no one would investigate it. It was just to make the landlord feel better. She thought fraud was okay as long as it didn't get noticed. I asked why she hadn't sold her own equipment or asked Jake for money. She said Jake had no income and needed support. You can absorb it, she said. Not afford it, absorb it. That word described my role in the family perfectly. I was always expected to take on her bills, her crises, her insults, and her lies. She threatened to tell my employer that I'd used my professional position to intimidate her landlord. I told her I'd saved every message, and Sarah had copies. Any false accusation would be met with a full documented response. Her voice changed. You saved everything? She asked. Yes, I